Hi, I'm Barbary Duke, Managing Editor here at Directions Magazine, and welcome to another Directions Mag podcast, co-hosted today with our friends at Nearmap. Digital transformation, we see it daily, but what does it mean to you? The words can infer massive change that many may not be ready to take on, but recent times have taught us why it's so critical to embrace tools that can accelerate your digital transformation. GIS technology has risen to the spotlight for those in government, especially as they work to keep our communities safe in the face of adversity, but the benefits go far beyond. With access to the most up-to-date location intelligence, you'll be on track to enhancing your workflows, no matter your needs. But there are challenges to overcome, and Nearmap, which delivers content and high-res aerial content via its wide-scale proactive survey capture program, can help. From procurement to best practices for leveraging data internally and externally, hear from industry experts as they walk through how innovative aerial solutions and geospatial technology can propel your organization forward. Welcome to Brett Clark, James Kelt, and Shane Burnham to discuss today's topic, True Location Intelligence, the core of digital transformation for GIS. Welcome, gentlemen.
Well, thanks, Barbary. We're excited to be on the podcast today, as always, working with Directions Magazine. And I'm very excited to be joined by two other folks who I get to work with. Again, my name is Brett Clark. I'm our director for our public sector here in North America at Nearmap, US. I'm also joined by Shane Burnham from the city of Carmel, Indiana, and James Kelt from GTG. So I want to first turn to Shane to give a quick introduction on himself, tell us a little bit about what he does in the city of Carmel, and then we'll move over to James, and then we'll jump right into it. So Shane.
Yeah, I am Shane Burnham, GIS analyst with the city of Carmel. I've had a long, illustrious career in GIS for about 15 years now, and here I am working for my hometown. Part of what I do for the city is I act as our city works administrator, and I do a lot of high level administration tasks with the ArcGIS Suite Pro portal and the enterprise suite.
And for those listening that may not be familiar with Carmel, Indiana, it is Roundabout City, USA, if I understand correctly, right, Shane?
That's correct. We're up to we have 134 roundabouts and counting. We are the roundabout capital. So
Wow.
So be sure to take a look at that. Take a look at that on Nearmap when you get the chance.
That's right. Yes, you keep putting them in too. And it's a city, your population is a little over 100,000 now, right? Or getting close to it?
Yes, we just hit that milestone in 2019.
Wow. Okay. Perfect. And that's, again, for context, that is directly north of Indianapolis, Indiana. So just a little context and fun facts there. Thank you, Shane. Appreciate you being on here. James, let's hop over to you.
Yes, thanks, Brett. Thanks, Shane. Enjoyed. Thanks for the time today to meet with everybody for today's podcast. My name is James Kelt. I'm the Vice President of Corporate Software with Geographic Technologies Group. We're a full-service GIS firm. We're focused on North America, local government, GIS, and geospatial services and solutions. We've been in business since 1997. I'm in my 19th year with the company, so I've been around the block a few times. Yeah, we're excited about today's podcast and the relationship that we've built with Nearmap, and also the Esri business partner relationship that we all share. So yeah, thanks for the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, thank you both. James, I echo from the Nearmap side the excitement and enthusiasm we have around partnering with GTG. Like them, we are also Esri partners and work within that network. And so we're hoping for the listeners today that they get a good flavor of, a GIS services firm like GTG, a location intelligence firm like Nearmap, and then someone perhaps like those of you listening who's an actual GIS professional at a local government like Shane. And so we want to make sure we kind of got the three stooges here on the line and talk through GIS. So to restate our theme and the title of this podcast, just for everyone's benefit, the true location intelligence, the core of digital transformation for GIS. And what we wanted to do was touch on a few topics that we'll kind of meander our way through during the next several minutes. centering around this theme. So to give some context, Nearmap, just since following the introductions here, we are a location intelligence firm where we proactively and primarily go out and collect aerial imagery data. It's that core data that can then be used to extract feature layers, utilized to scope out more roundabouts, for example, and we'll certainly dive into some use cases. And we're going to go to Shane first on this around things like impervious area layers and other details like that. But what we've seen in the market that I've found is unique, and Shane, you're going to have to correct me where I'm off or back me up here, is a bit what we saw happen to the music industry. So stick with me on this analogy, okay? Traditionally, if people wanted aerial imagery, they would issue an RFP. It's a big, long process. There's a one-off shot that costs a big wad of cash. So it's typically a capital expense instead of an operating expense. So they try to break that over a few years. It's a one-off flight, and they stretch it for as long as they can, make it last 1, 2, 3, sometimes 5 or more years. It's a lot like how we used to buy music. You used to go to the record store and you buy the record. It's yours, you keep it, but that's that. You know, if there's flaws in it, you're stuck with it. If it starts to get worn out from listening to side A too much, that's on you. And then we kind of evolved as an industry. We started doing CDs and things like that. Then the MP3 came along, but then iTunes happened. We could go in and say, you know what? I'm thinking of my daughters here. I really like this song from Taylor Swift, but the rest of her album I don't need. And so I'm going to buy that one song for 99 cents, right? That's not my personal playlist. That's my daughter's, just a caveat there. But we even evolved beyond that to where now you pay something like $9, $10 a month, and you have access to any song you want, essentially, throughout the world. And you can stream that onto your device. You can save it on playlists, etc. And if you stop subscribing, you know, you lose access. That's kind of the trade-off. But you no longer have to buy and get stuck with this data. And that's really what Nearmap has tried to do. And we see other aspects of the GIS industry going this way to where, you know what, it's okay to be in the cloud, and it's okay to subscribe versus, you know, taking up terabytes of space on a hard drive just because you feel like you have to, you know, quote unquote, own the data. Now, certainly there's always a use for having a local copy, and that's something that's easy to do. But that's really where we've seen, from our perspective, again, coming from Nearmap's perspective, the industry kind of transform. So I'm curious, Shane, does that analogy hold water with you? Can you relate to that through, as you said, your illustrious GIS career so far?
Brett, that is impressive. That is a fantastic analogy. That is the first I've heard that here right now. It's right now. So kind of going back with Carmel, is Carmel traditionally, Carmel resides in what's Hamilton County, Indiana, which is the adjacent county to Marion County, which is where Indianapolis is. And Hamilton County is it's your average sized U.S. county. It's about 400 square miles. And Hamilton County, traditionally in the past, we have gotten that annual orthophotography flyover, which, as we all know, it's annual. And that was only if the county had it in their budget in that fiscal year to buy into that flyover. Having that expensive flyover, playing devil's advocate to Brett's point, once you have that flyover, you do own it, but it's a capital operating expense. It's very expensive to do. And with our area in Carmel, and really Hamilton County as a whole, the rapid growth, we got to the point where sometimes we would have that aerial every year. Sometimes we would have that aerial every 3 years. There was one point where we didn't have an ortho flyover for, I think it was 4 or 5 years. With Nearmap now, with Carmel hitting that 100,000 resident milestone, like we were just talking about a couple of years ago, being subscribed to that as a service and having that up-to-date imagery. Right now, Nearmap flies the city of Carmel area and the rest of the Indy Metro twice a year. It's it's revolutionary, I would say. That might be kind of a deep, strong term there, but
I'll
Carmel has
accept it.
just
That's fine.
oh yeah, okay, good. Carmel just has taken it and ran with it. And here in a little while, I'm going to speak more to how we've taken that imagery and how we've integrated it with our GIS data sets and keeping them up to date with the infrastructure blitz in Carmel and the rapid expansion of Carmel.
No, that's really interesting, and I appreciate you sharing that, Shane. And it's validating to hear, because we see that a lot. And I would say too, Carmel is unique because, again, you're right. You're kind of I would say the northernmost non-Indianapolis suburb, because you're in a different county, and so you have the benefit of being in kind of that urban core, if you will. But even then, I've spoken with many other counties and cities where they would kill to have a once-a-year flyover. That's a luxury. We typically see every other or 3 years is the average, even in some urban centers. And I'm curious, James, I'd like to bring you in on this.
Sure.
You talk with a lot of different local governments. Are you seeing this as well? This kind of shift away from the older way of doing things towards being more accepting of SaaS, if you will, software as a service, or cloud-based technologies?
Absolutely, yes. So in my experience, whenever I talk to agencies that leverage and need good aerial photography and base raster imagery, the challenge always is, well, how current is this data? The first question I typically get asked when I show, various data set is, when was that taken, right? And if it's 3 years old, it's 3 years old, and the world changes dynamically, as we all know. So I get that quite a bit, especially in a lot of different departments, like emergency operations, even parks and recreation. That data changes quite a bit. So having current, up-to-date imagery, I think, is invaluable in my client base. So I think Shane hit the mark on the head there when he had mentioned that it's absolutely a necessity to have that most current, up-to-date information, no matter who the user is.
In the beginning, I did say revolutionary. When I was connected with Nearmap for the first time, I was like, so we can get multiple flyovers within a year? Get out of here. I gotta see this. and sure enough, yeah, here we are using it and rocking and rolling with it. So that was my color commentary. Continue, Brett.
I love it. I love it. This is not a paid promotion, by the way. I have to make that, but I appreciate the plug by Shane. It's absolutely true. It's something that's unique to Nearmap in that I kind of joke. So I actually grew up in Noblesville, Indiana, which is hometown rival of Carmel. At least we claim that. They might not. But I grew up there. I worked at the local KFC, and people would jokingly ask me, what are the 11 herbs and spices? And I said, I have no idea. They just come in this marked bag. Nearmap's ability to go out and rapidly collect and accurately collect that data, that's a bit of our 11 herbs and spices, if you will. It's that technology that we've developed and patented that allows us to do that, that can enable local governments, especially whether it's, like James mentioned, Parks and Rec or emergency management, you name it, to stay on top of those changes. The discussion point comes up a lot, and I'd be curious to get both y'all's feedback on this, is that especially from GIS professionals, we get asked, well, what's the spatial accuracy of your data? And they want to really hone in on the root mean square, if I'm saying that correctly, the RMSE, because they want it as close as possible, which we totally appreciate, and we have very accurate imagery. But oftentimes I chuckle to myself a little bit because they say, well, we have 5-inch accuracy imagery, even though it's an 8-inch or 12-inch resolution shot, but it's several years old. And so my counter argument to them is, that's great that you have very, very, right dead center imagery, but is that really accurate? Because to James' point, that was 3 years ago. Are you telling me that nothing has changed in your area in 3 years? So what I feel is unique to Nearmap is the temporal nature of this data. That it used to be this one-off thing that had to be just absolutely dead on because you were stuck with it for a year, 2, 3, 5 years. Not saying it's just quick and dirty, because our imagery isn't, but there is now, I feel like, a greater emphasis on the temporal nature of data and data sets. Would y'all agree? Am I off on that, or what would be your thoughts on that?
I would agree 100%. I've got actually a personal anecdote. I'm down here in Texas, and I'm sure everybody has heard in the news the last month the big winter storm that we had down here. We don't handle the cold very well down here. It's something that's very unique to us. Well, we got about 12, 14 inches of snow dumped on us, and sub-zero temps for a better part of a week. And when we thawed out, I actually had 3 neighbors in my neighborhood with water breaks, when pipes bust and so forth. And I was able to, I literally brought up the Nearmap imagery, and I was able to zoom in front of everybody's house that I knew had a water main break or a water pipe break, and use the measuring tool because I could see the meter box, the blue meter box in everybody's front yard. Now, we had a general idea where it was, but we're covered with 14 inches of snow. So there was we had to find the meter box. I measured it from the sidewalk or a tree in the area, and then we dug out each one, got to the meter box, and was able to turn off their water and save probably thousands of dollars for each home just because of the water damage. So there was 3, like I said, there was 3 folks in my neighborhood. I said, I can find your meter box. I've never seen it, but I can find it.
Right.
So that accuracy, I was within a foot, maybe 2 feet, 14 feet from, due east of the mailbox, that kind of thing. We get out our shovels and start digging, and sure enough, there was a meter box. So,
wow.
Yes, it was impressive. In a timely manner, we were able to locate those valve cutoffs.
So James, kind of piggybacking on that, and we'll probably get to this later on, but our utilities use Nearmap extensively with all the rapid growth in the city of Carmel right now, to update all of our utility data, all of our water meter data, having that multiple flyover, I guess luxury is what we'll call it. They're able to stay on top of that. It's great having that up-to-date imagery.
And that's when we know we're successful as GIS professionals, right? People are using GIS without realizing it. Traditionally, that sat in the hands of a few, highly trained GIS professionals. Well, as we all know, the industry is moving to a point where GIS is a tool for everybody, geospatial tools. And good, accurate data, especially aerial photography, oblique imagery, and so forth, is the base of that. When people start using it and leveraging it, the workflow and the solutions really hit home to the various users, whether it be internal, like Shane at your organization and the departments that you serve, but also the residents, the citizens and residents that you serve as well can use these tools.
That's a great point that I want to put an extra emphasis on for our listening base, is that you've been successful with a geospatial program when there are people that are doing quote unquote GIS and they don't even know it. I love that quote by James because it's absolutely true. I'm reminded of one of our long-standing customers in the city of Chicago, their Office of Emergency Management and Communications, which is essentially police, fire, EMS, 911 response. When they first began implementing Nearmap within their dispatch centers, and again, for context, they have anywhere from about 200 to 400 active 911 workstations, fielding between 13 and 15,000 911 calls per day. So massive volume. It got to the point where dispatchers and call takers were starting to place bets on when the new image would come up, when another image would be posted. That's GIS, right? They're doing that. They're like, oh wow, this is a new. It might just seem like an image, but that's geospatial intelligence. That's location intelligence, and that's transforming the way not only the people operate, but it also has been changing their expectation. Because I would venture to guess, Shane, that the city of Carmel, if let's say we shut off service today and you went back to once per year, that would no longer be good enough. That I would venture to guess there's an itch now that would have to be scratched that says one flyover a year does not satisfy our needs, be it utility or otherwise. Is that a fair assumption?
Brett, that would be a huge itch. That would be a poison ivy level related itch. Yeah, no, it's so kind of. I'll harp on I'll give the abridged version of our Nearmap origin story. The main reason why we consider Nearmap in the first place is Carmel has we have a hard surface impervious surface building program that's through our stormwater department, and in order to keep those polygons in GIS up to date, having one flyover a year wasn't cutting it. With the growth in Carmel, every commercial property gets a variable rate based upon the size of the GIS feature, the size of the polygon, the square footage of it. And with all of the infrastructure going in with roundabouts, you have development, you have plazas, you have retail, that it was getting to the point where we weren't able to keep up with that singular once a year flyover. And then lo and behold, Nearmap comes along, and I'm like, oh my God, how in the heck am I supposed to keep up with this? Here's the solution right here. And then from there, the rest is history. We, as I said earlier, keep our utilities, water meters up to date with it. We use it for addressing purposes, keeping address points up to date. With the being roundabout capital USA, we keep street center lines up to date that our fancy roundabouts lie upon. The Nearmap is the hydrocortisone cream that would definitely salve that poison ivy itch that Brett was alluding to.
Shane, you're making me laugh because, again, being a native Midwesterner who loved to venture out into the woods, poison ivy, unfortunately, is something I'm all too familiar with. So. But if it were my mother, it would have been calamine lotion salving that itch. But that's a whole other podcast topic. But no, it's
oatmeal bath, Brett. Oatmeal bath.
There you go, oatmeal bath. Yep. Maybe an old wives' tale of taking a banana peel and rubbing it on there. I don't know. There's a lot of things that never seem to work enough to satisfy it. But you've both touched on this because and I currently reside in Fishers, Indiana, which is the eastern neighbor of Carmel that is also a boom town, growing leaps and bounds. For context, in the early 90s, both Carmel and Fishers, I believe, were less than 20,000 people. So now in about 20, 30 years, it's boomed to over 100,000 each, I believe, each city. Texas, obviously, where James is located, continues to build and build and build. And so I am thinking of, back to James, your personal anecdote, as you said, about, look, trying to find these meter boxes. I would go a step further and say, if that had occurred, what if, people are calling and saying, hey, my neighbor's house is flooding, or there's some sort of event that's happening, I need you to come out. And when they go to pull up their base map, it's just a blank field because they haven't updated it for. And in Texas or in central Indiana, they build neighborhoods like, they're just going out of style. Even if your image is only a year old, you could be seeing a blank field when they're like, no, I'm in a new development. I imagine that could also pose a very real problem for places where they're experiencing rapid growth like y'all have in Texas or in central Indiana where we're located, or the other problem that we've seen in places like Cleveland or Detroit, where they have a massive blight problem. So they're demoing down these derelict structures left and right to the tune of 9,000 to 10,000 structures a year, for example. In our discussions with the city of Detroit, they mentioned that kind of number. I just feel like especially in places of rapid change, having more up-to-date information and getting that accurate data is absolutely crucial. I'm wondering, James, if there's any other stories that you can think of or use cases that have come out of your discussions with other clients that you work with along those lines.
You bet. Yeah, and I think exactly what you hit on there, Brett, is change detection. Not only looking back in time at what an area used to look like, but what is it like today? I often talk with building permit folks in the permitting department. And one big thing that always comes up to them is being able to identify parcels or locations where maybe a new structure was built, someone installed a shed or a swimming pool, above ground swimming pool without a permit. And looking at that change detection will quickly give them the ability to say, well, in spring of 2020, there was nothing in their backyard. Now we're looking at 9 months later, there's an above ground swimming pool there. Well, let's overlay the permitting data coming out of their ERP system or their community development database on top of that GIS, on top of that Nearmap data, to see if there was a permit issued for it. And if not, well, that's a problem. They built a structure without a permit. I get that quite a bit. I touched on public safety. That's a huge user of this type of information. A lot of police departments, sheriff's departments want to do reconnaissance in the field. Maybe they're going to serve a felony warrant at a location, and they want to get the lay of the land so they can put their teams in certain locations. They want to visualize the building. Are there, bars on the windows? Very good high resolution stuff to make intelligent decisions before they deploy officers to a location. They want as much information as they can about that particular structure. Emergency operations centers, that's another big thing. Pre-disaster and post-disaster recovery. What did the building look like before the tornado hit or before the flooding event hit? So we can do the assessment of those particular locations. Parks and recreation I touched on as well earlier, doing asset inventory. What do we have in our parks? A lot of GIS folks serve the entire organization. Shane, I'm sure you can speak to this. And there's only so many hours in the day, but we also want to engage fully to all these departments. So doing an inventory of the park assets and the condition of each one, and park planning. Maybe we want to invest in a green space and make baseball fields out of it, soccer fields out of it. Bringing up that Nearmap data helps us to make those decisions before spending time in the field and doing that out of office type work. Those are just a few examples that I've seen, and I'm sure, Shane, you have plenty as well.
Yeah, and I would quickly interject, James, if I could. Going back to back to code enforcement. It reminds me of appraisal as well. When they're looking to see changes that have been added so that they can, update the tax records, things like that. One of the things I ran into a lot was it's not just that, updated aerial information is useful to actually do the initial assessment to update the tax records, but it becomes an invaluable tool when you start the appeals process. For when people are coming in and shaking their fist at you and saying, hey, why did my taxes go up? And you're like, hey, you built a huge extension on the back. P.S., you didn't get a permit. Yeah. And, being able to pull up an image and say, this is time stamped, see? It becomes a transparency tool, a communication tool, if you will, that goes beyond, to an early point you made, James, about it's not just other departments, but it also can be citizens as well that are benefiting from this, because now, there's more frequent updates. And I've found scenarios, I think it might have been with some of the appraisal districts in Texas or elsewhere that I'm thinking of in this case, but they only were getting an image every 3 years. And so they saw an image from 2017, it didn't have the pool, let's say. And then in 2020, it did have the pool. Well, the assumption has to be, if there's no permit, in 2018 and 2019, the pool was there. And so we have to back tax you. Well, then you got an irate citizen coming in the office saying, no, this is wrong. You're saying, well, look, all we have is 2017 and 2020. We have this gap. We have no choice to back tax you for that, and you didn't pull any permits, and so you're kind of stuck. But if you have even one update per year or multiple updates a year, you see that timeline and you can identify not just, hey, there's change now, but you can watch the progression of it, or you can more accurately pinpoint when that change actually occurred. And that's something that we've run into that's proved very useful from having more updated information. Laying aside all of the other myriad of use cases that you've mentioned.
Multiple, yes.
Yeah, it really, and that's something I'm curious, Shane, because James did bring up, often GIS services all sorts of departments and people. How has having more updated imagery, like Nearmap, how has that, improved or expanded? How has that changed, your role being GIS at the city?
Well, it goes back to bringing GIS to a non-GIS user, and I feel like at the government level, I might be speaking a little bit out of turn here. GIS isn't so much, you've got the experts, you've got the SMEs in GIS, you got the people creating the points and lines in GIS day in and day out, but GIS is becoming more of a BI tool. It's becoming more of a tool to conduct analysis with, another tool in the tool belt. And sometimes all people want to see is just, I need an aerial. That's all I need. I don't need ArcGIS Pro. I don't need ArcMap. All I want to do is just log on. I need to see an aerial really quickly of an area. And Nearmap provides that. Its beauty, I feel like, is it gives you that quick picture of an area of
intended, right?
Yeah, there we go. Bazinga, nailed it on the head. It gives you that visual of an intersection or a property for assessment, or if planning is using it for any kind of change or variance, they can quickly see progression over the years. But conversely, it also is beneficial to the GIS user, because Nearmap it plays nicely with Portal. You can consume it as a service inside Portal. You can consume it as a service, that image service inside ArcGIS Pro as well. So it brings GIS to the non-GIS user, but it also at the same time augments the ability for GIS users and GIS experts to do their jobs as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of a great finalizing statement to our discussion today, because it really, I think, speaks to how we're seeing the industry transform. One thing I've come to appreciate about the GIS industry is that they're the most keen that I've seen to educate people, to get people involved. They're very passionate, which is something I love. And so while others might see, this transformation, this migrating to where non-GIS people can do GIS too, rather than being seen as a threat, I have perceived it as almost this celebration. Awesome. More people are appreciating what we do. We're more than just the math people, right? We're more than just those people that dink around and update the maps and the lines and stuff. This bleeds into every aspect of running a local government entity, or even on the state or federal level. It bleeds into so many aspects of our everyday lives, very, very real things, down to paint striping and potholes, to digging up your neighbor's water valve to shut it off. I mean, it runs the gamut. And so that's where I feel like we're seeing that transition and change. And from our perspective at Nearmap, what we're trying to do is make sure that we have data that's up to date, accurate, very high quality. But then rather than saying, hey, come learn a new platform like Nearmap, being flexible enough to say, you know what, if you utilize Esri or you're using GTG as your full service provider for that, we can integrate into that. If you need to take our content and plug it into CityWorks, or Rapid Deploy or some other type of tool, you can do that. We can enable that. It's becoming this kind of living, breathing organism that can easily play well with all the other kids on the playground. And so I want to just pass it around again to Shane or James to make any final comments before we wrap up.
Okay. Yeah, it's, kind of some things that are on the horizon with Carmel is I've been holding up the process. We're looking to get it integrated with CityWorks very soon, probably here within the month. That's going to help out our utility staff tremendously when they're making site visits or doing any kind of asset management or asset maintenance. And we're also exploring some of the AI options that Nearmap provides for sensing and picking up GIS features, above ground GIS features around the city. We're considering using Nearmap for possibly picking up light poles or solar panels. Those options are being researched, of course, but we never really hit on those, but that's another service that Nearmap provides as well.
Yeah, another topic for another podcast, right? There's so much to go over. I feel up all the time, but no, that's fantastic. Thank you, Shane. Thank you. James, over to you.
You bet. Yeah, well, I'm real excited about where the industry is going these days. I've seen in the last 3 years really more in new initiatives and new ways of viewing data and new ways of consuming GIS than I have in my 20 plus years in the industry. So I think we're really in a great space right now for taking this to a level that, and we all know we're GIS professionals, we see this stuff as invaluable, but really getting it out to the folks in the like we talked earlier, the non-GIS professionals, is a huge game changer for the industry. And we're typically the head of the sphere with this type of stuff, but I want to share this with as many people as we can. If I can share data and information and apps and tools and other GIS geospatial solutions, I see that as invaluable for the industry. But the only thing I have left for you, Brett, is when are we going to go fly? Let's get up, let's go and take the pictures.
That's right.
I can get in a jump seat and see what we got up there.
There we go. I would love to go up. That would be a fantastic experience. It's go and, as we call it, mow the lawn in the sky, since that's how we collect the imagery. No, absolutely.
Just don't run into any poison ivy in the sky.
Right.
Yeah, we'll avoid that for sure. No, I want to thank you both, James and Shane, for coming on today and chatting with us. And really a great conversation. I really appreciate all the insight and just how relative and in touch with not only your own spheres, but just kind of the industry in general. So I really appreciate that. So I want to thank GTG, the City of Carmel, thank Nearmap, and last of all, our host and sponsor. I want to thank Directions Magazine for letting us be a part of this podcast, and we hope you all enjoy it and have a great day.